The first time I saw her, I felt an immediate, inexplicable pull, the kind that makes you forget how long you've been standing in a room. I had come over to my friend's house for a casual Saturday afternoon, expecting the usual jokes, video games, and maybe some bad snacks. Instead, I was greeted by something entirely different. She was in the kitchen when I arrived, leaning slightly against the counter, effortlessly graceful. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, catching the light in a way that made me blink twice, unsure if I was seeing properly. She looked up, and her eyes met mine, sharp, confident, yet tinged with a warmth I couldn't name. Then, she smiled. Not just any smile. The kind that seems to know a secret about you before you've even realized it yourself. It was teasing, gentle, and entirely disarming. "You're too young to handle me? Want to try anyway?" she said, her voice low and melodic, slipping past my defenses before I could even process it. My chest tightened, my heart stuttering for reasons I wasn't ready to admit. We shook hands, but the gesture felt like something more. Her touch lingered a fraction longer than expected, the warmth seeping into my palm in a way that made the rest of the world fade. I wanted to step back, remind myself of the age difference, the social boundary, but I couldn't. Instead, I found myself stealing glances at the way she moved, the effortless elegance in her posture, the calm assurance that made the whole kitchen feel smaller, more intimate. The air smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla, a comforting scent, yet it was impossible to ignore the subtle undercurrent of something more, something electric that had nothing to do with the aroma. I realized I was noticing details I would normally overlook. The soft rustle of her sleeve when she reached for a mug, the way her fingers grazed the edge of the counter, the brief, almost accidental brush of her hand against my arm as she passed by. Every small movement felt magnified, weighted with unspoken meaning. She laughed lightly when my friend appeared, and it sounded like music I wanted to memorize. Yet when our eyes met again across the room, there was that same teasing spark, that quiet challenge that made my stomach twist in both anticipation and nerves. I was aware of every inch of space between us, the heat of her gaze, the unspoken invitation in the tilt of her head. Even as the afternoon passed with casual chatter, a subtle tension lingered, a delicate thread connecting us. I told myself it was just curiosity, admiration, maybe even a little intimidation, but deep down, I knew it was more. Something unspoken had begun, a slow-burning intrigue that neither of us could ignore. And as I left that day, walking back to my car with a mind buzzing and a heart that refused to settle, I realized I would never forget that smile, nor the way it made me feel like I'd stumbled into something both forbidden and irresistible. It started innocently enough. My friend had run out to grab something, leaving me alone in the living room with his mom. Normally, this would have been unremarkable, but that afternoon, the air seemed to thrum with unspoken energy, as if the room itself knew something was about to change. She looked up from the book she was reading, and for a moment we just watched each other. There was no need for words. The quiet was enough. I felt it immediately, that peculiar mix of nervous anticipation and an inexplicable comfort, the kind that makes your chest feel simultaneously light and heavy. I told myself to breathe normally, but my lungs betrayed me, catching in tiny, uneven gasps whenever our eyes met. We began to talk. At first about mundane things, a favorite movie, music tastes, books. Yet even in those small exchanges, there was an intensity one couldn't ignore. Her voice was soft but precise, each word deliberate, wrapping around me like the gentle warmth of sunlight on a cool day. I found myself leaning just a fraction closer, drawn to the cadence of her laughter, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. Small, accidental touches punctuated the conversation. She adjusted the sleeve of my shirt once, brushing her fingers lightly against my arm. My skin tingled at the contact, a subtle warmth spreading through my chest, and I realized that my heart had skipped a beat. I handed her a book she wanted to read, and our fingers met briefly. Not just a touch, but a spark, a fleeting connection that lingered in my mind long after. Her presence was magnetic in a way that went beyond attraction. There was a quiet steadiness about her, a calm confidence that made the room feel simultaneously intimate and charged. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, a delicate mix of vanilla and jasmine, drifting toward me, subtle yet intoxicating. Every time she shifted, I became acutely aware of the proximity between us, the soft brush of her hand against mine, the warmth of her shoulder when she leaned slightly to reach a book. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, I became painfully conscious of the boundary between us, yet the desire to linger in her presence was irresistible. She caught my glance and raised an eyebrow in playful acknowledgement, a hint of that teasing spark from the first encounter. I felt both flustered and exhilarated, acutely aware of my racing pulse, my hands clammy with anticipation. Before I knew it, the sound of the front door closing signaled my friend's return. I stepped back, suddenly aware of the distance I had unconsciously closed. She smiled, soft, knowing, and just a little mischievous, as if silently saying, "This is only the beginning." I left the room with my mind buzzing, replaying every touch, every look, every fleeting brush of warmth. That unexpected, ordinary moment had shifted something fundamental. I wasn't just curious anymore. I was captivated, caught between the thrill of forbidden attraction and the magnetic pull of a connection that promised depth, warmth, and a slow-burning intensity one wasn't ready to resist. It was a quiet evening when it happened, one of those ordinary moments that somehow felt extraordinary. My friend had gone out for errands again, leaving me alone with his mom. We were sitting on the couch, talking about nothing in particular, yet the air between us was thick with unspoken energy. Every laugh, every glance carried a weight I couldn't name, a tension that made my chest tighten and my stomach flutter with anticipation. She leaned back slightly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes met mine, sharp and playful, and I felt my heart stutter. "You know," she said softly, almost teasingly, "I'm not sure you're ready for someone like me." There was a challenge in her tone, a mischievous spark that made my pulse spike. I wanted to laugh it off, to pretend I wasn't affected, but I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat, betraying the sudden heat rising in me. The teasing wasn't just in her words. It was in the way she watched me, the subtle tilt of her head, the way her lips curved just enough to suggest a secret she wasn't ready to share. Every gesture was deliberate yet casual, drawing me in without crossing any boundaries. I realized I was leaning forward slightly, captivated by the rhythm of her presence, the warmth radiating from her like sunlight through a window. A small, accidental touch set my nerves alight. I reached for a magazine, and she reached at the same time. Our fingers brushed, lightly, almost imperceptibly, but the spark was immediate. I felt a jolt run through me, a strange mix of excitement and nerves, and I knew she felt it too. Her eyes lingered on mine a fraction longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement that we were treading into uncharted territory. We continued talking, but the conversation itself became secondary. I noticed the way her shoulders relaxed when she laughed, the subtle shifts in her posture when she leaned closer to emphasize a point, the quiet grace in every movement. Her voice, soft yet commanding, wrapped around me like a warm blanket, making me painfully aware of the space between us, and yet wishing it could disappear entirely. When she laughed at something I said, it felt intimate, almost conspiratorial, as if we were sharing a private joke the rest of the world couldn't hear. My hands itched to reach out, to brush a strand of hair from her face, but I hesitated, acutely aware of the boundary that society had placed between us. And yet, even in that hesitation, there was something thrilling, the kind of tension that makes a moment linger far longer than it should. Finally, she leaned back, giving me that teasing smile again. It was soft, knowing, and utterly disarming. "Careful," she said lightly, "or you might surprise yourself." My stomach twisted with a mixture of anticipation and guilt, the line between curiosity and desire blurring with every heartbeat. I realized then that the playful tease wasn't just fun. It was an invitation, subtle but unmistakable, and it had me completely captivated. That evening, I left with my mind buzzing and my senses heightened. Every look, every touch, every word replayed endlessly, weaving a slow-burning tension that I knew would only grow stronger in the days to come. The next afternoon, I found myself back at my friend's house, though this time the air felt heavier, charged with a quiet anticipation I couldn't quite name. My friend had gone to meet someone, leaving me once again alone with his mom. But today was different. The teasing smile was still there, yes, but beneath it, I sensed something deeper, something unspoken waiting to be acknowledged. We ended up in the living room, the sunlight spilling softly through the blinds, casting warm, shifting patterns across the floor. She sat in her favorite armchair, and I sank into the sofa across from her, careful not to invade her space, yet unable to ignore the closeness that seemed to exist without effort. She picked up a photo album from the coffee table and began flipping through it, her fingers tracing the edges of pictures with a gentleness that made me lean forward, intrigued. "I don't talk about this much," she said quietly, almost to herself, "but sometimes I wonder if I've missed out on things. On love, on connection, on someone really knowing me." Her voice was low, tinged with melancholy, and I felt a pang in my chest, an unexpected tenderness I wasn't prepared for. She looked up, and our eyes met. No teasing spark this time, only honesty, raw and vulnerable. I hesitated for a moment, then reached out instinctively, my hand brushing against hers. It wasn't bold, not even deliberate, but the contact lingered, the warmth of her skin, the subtle pressure of her fingers, the quiet thrum of connection that seemed to pass between us without a single word. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her hand rest lightly on mine, and in that simple gesture, the air between us shifted, charged with unspoken understanding. We talked for hours, really talked, not about movies or music, but about life, about regrets, about the quiet moments of loneliness that so often go unnoticed. I listened intently, captivated not by attraction alone, but by the honesty of someone opening themselves fully, the kind of intimacy that leaves you both awed and afraid. Each sentence she spoke carried weight, each pause and sigh resonating in the room, and I realized I wasn't just drawn to her physically anymore. I was drawn to the depth of her mind, the subtle fractures of vulnerability she usually hid behind a confident exterior. At one point, she leaned slightly forward, her shoulder brushing mine. It was accidental, perhaps, but my heart lurched anyway. The soft warmth of her proximity, the faint scent of her perfume, the rhythm of her breathing. It all became almost overwhelming, and I had to remind myself to breathe. For the first time, I felt a sense of equality in our connection. No teasing, no playful challenges, just two people acknowledging each other's hearts. I realized that this slow-burning attraction wasn't just about desire. It was about trust, about moments of quiet vulnerability that made every laugh, every smile, every touch that would come afterward feel infinitely more profound. When my friend returned, the spell of the afternoon lingered. I left with my mind buzzing, heart still pounding, and a new awareness. This wasn't just a fleeting crush or playful tension anymore. Something real was beginning to grow, quietly, subtly, but with a weight I could already feel in my chest. It was one of those quiet evenings that feels suspended in time. My friend was out with some other friends, leaving me once again in the house with his mom. The sunlight had faded into a warm, golden haze, and the soft hum of the city outside made the living room feel like a private world. We found ourselves in the kitchen, cooking together, nothing complicated, just preparing a simple dinner. Yet every gesture, every glance, carried weight. She handed me a bowl, and our fingers brushed lightly. It was a fleeting touch, but the warmth that spread through me lingered far longer than it should have. I noticed the subtle grace in her movements, the way she shifted her weight while stirring the sauce, the gentle tilt of her head when she hummed a song under her breath. Each small detail drew me in, reminding me again how different she was from anyone I had ever known. We laughed at small mistakes. I almost dropped a plate, and she nudged me gently, a playful smile tugging at her lips. The brush of her hand against mine as she steadied the plate sent a shiver down my spine. There was a closeness here that hadn't existed before, a delicate balance between comfort and desire, one that made it impossible to think clearly yet impossible to pull away. After dinner, we carried our dishes to the couch. I sat next to her as she began tidying the kitchen from the couch itself, a habit she had, resting lightly while keeping everything in order. Our knees brushed. It was accidental, harmless. Yet I felt the subtle warmth of her leg near mine, and my chest tightened, heart racing. I caught her glance, and there it was, a teasing spark, tempered by affection, an acknowledgement that she knew exactly the effect she had on me. Then came the small, intimate gesture that cemented the moment. I helped adjust a scarf she was wearing, brushing a stray strand of hair from her shoulder. Her eyes softened, and she let out a quiet sigh, almost imperceptible, leaning just slightly closer than necessary. I could feel the warmth of her presence pressing gently against me, a subtle magnetic pull that made my fingers linger a heartbeat too long. In that moment, everything else, the age difference, the social boundaries, the logic that had always guided me, faded into the background. We didn't speak much. There was no need. The room was filled with quiet energy, the faint aroma of dinner still lingering in the air, the soft hum of a distant car outside, the warmth of her hand near mine. I realized that this wasn't about words or playful teasing anymore. This was a first real connection, one that carried intimacy beyond attraction. a silent understanding that we were exploring something delicate, precious, and entirely unscripted. When my friend returned later that evening, I felt a pang of disappointment, a wish for just a few more stolen moments. Yet as I left that night, replaying every small touch, every fleeting glance, every heartbeat that had skipped in her presence, I knew something had shifted. The tension between us was no longer playful alone. It was charged with promise, with potential, and with the quiet thrill of first connection that neither of us could ignore. It was late evening, the kind of night where the world outside seems to fade into shadows, leaving only the soft glow of lamps and the quiet hum of distant traffic. My friend had gone out again, leaving the house nearly empty, and I found myself sitting in the living room, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. There was a calmness here, but beneath it, I could feel a tension simmering, one that had been building for weeks, quietly, deliberately. She walked in, carrying a blanket and 2 mugs of tea, and offered one to me with a small smile. "Thought you might need this," she said, her voice low and gentle. I took it, our fingers brushing as I accepted the mug, and I felt a jolt. Not surprising, yet always thrilling. The warmth of her touch lingering longer than necessary. We sat together on the couch, the distance between us charged yet carefully measured. We began talking, though this time the conversation was different. It wasn't casual. It wasn't playful. It was honest, probing, and filled with a vulnerability that neither of us had fully allowed before. She spoke about longing, about the unexpected loneliness of carrying the weight of experience while still yearning for connection. Her eyes were soft, searching mine for understanding, and in that quiet, I realized I wasn't just listening. I was feeling. I found my hands reaching for hers, not boldly, not demanding, but seeking a steadying presence. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let them rest together, the warmth of her palm against mine radiating something deeper than words could convey. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, a fragile cocoon of understanding, trust, and unspoken desire. Then she looked at me, really looked, and for a moment, the teasing playfulness of before melted into something else entirely. "I don't know if you understand what you're getting into," she said softly, her fingers brushing lightly along my wrist. "I'm complicated, and I'm not sure if someone your age could handle all of me." Her words weren't a warning. They were a challenge wrapped in vulnerability, an invitation to step closer, emotionally, not just physically. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding, and whispered, "I want to try. I want to know all of you." The words felt both terrifying and freeing, and for a heartbeat, the room fell silent, charged with the weight of mutual admission. She smiled, not the teasing smile from before, but a warm, tender one that reached her eyes, softening every edge. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned closer. Her shoulder brushed mine, and then a quiet, almost shy hug followed. Her cheek rested lightly against my chest, and I could feel the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, slow but certain, grounding me in a way nothing else could. We stayed like that for several minutes, neither of us speaking, letting the silence carry what words couldn't. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was intimate, steady, and suffused with a sense of possibility. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The teasing, the stolen glances, the subtle touches of weeks past. All of it led to this acknowledgement, quiet but profound, that we wanted the same thing: connection, understanding, and the slow, careful blossoming of something real. By the time the evening ended, the tension hadn't vanished. It had deepened, enriched by trust and mutual vulnerability. We knew the path ahead wouldn't be simple, but in that quiet confession, the first true step had been taken. And for the first time, I felt that anticipation wasn't frightening. It was exhilarating. The days that followed were slow, deliberate, and filled with a quiet, almost imperceptible excitement. The teasing and tension of the past weeks had transformed into something more substantial: a shared rhythm, a subtle dance of glances, touches, and laughter that neither of us needed to define with words. Our connection had grown steadily, like the soft bloom of a flower unfolding in sunlight, patient, inevitable, and quietly beautiful. That evening, the house was calm. My friend had gone out, leaving the two of us alone once more. We decided to sit on the porch, the night air warm and scented with the faint aroma of jasmine from the garden. A soft breeze stirred her hair, and I reached instinctively to brush it from her face. Her eyes met mine. The familiar teasing spark softened into something tender, almost shy. The warmth of her hand lingered on mine, and for a moment, the world beyond the porch ceased to exist. We didn't rush toward grand gestures. There was no urgency, no need to define or label what we were sharing. Instead, we allowed ourselves the quiet luxury of presence. I held her hand lightly, feeling the subtle strength in her grip, the warmth that spoke of comfort and trust. She rested her head gently on my shoulder, her hair brushing against my neck, and I could hear the steady rhythm of her breathing, a sound that had become as comforting as any familiar song. We talked softly, our voices mingling with the gentle hum of the night. She shared anecdotes from her past, the lessons she'd learned, and the little quirks of her heart she'd never revealed before. I listened, offering my own stories, my own vulnerabilities. Every shared smile, every lingering glance, deepened the intimacy between us. Touches were brief but meaningful. A hand on my forearm, the brush of a shoulder, the quiet intertwining of fingers that felt like a promise. For the first time, I realized that our connection wasn't fueled solely by attraction or excitement. It was rooted in understanding, patience, and the deliberate choice to be present for one another. The age gap, which had once seemed like a barrier, now felt like a gentle backdrop, emphasizing the depth and richness of what we shared. As the night stretched on, she sighed contentedly, still resting against me, and whispered, "I'm glad we found this, even if it took a little time." Her words, soft yet certain, carried the weight of reassurance, the quiet joy of two people who had discovered each other slowly, deliberately, and fully. I tightened my hand around hers, feeling a surge of warmth and certainty that this was real, grounded, and worth cherishing. We stayed like that until the stars were high above us, neither of us wanting to break the silence that spoke volumes. It was a gentle, warm conclusion to a story that had begun with curiosity and tension, blossomed through vulnerability and teasing, and now rested in mutual trust and affection. When I finally left that night, I carried with me a sense of fulfillment that I had never expected. The quiet, steady joy of having experienced a connection that was patient, deep, and enduring. We didn't need dramatic declarations or rushed confessions. In the slow, careful unfolding of our bond, we had discovered something far more precious: a love that was respectful, tender, and entirely our own.